The sun burned white over the small town square, so hot and merciless that the air itself seemed to tremble. Dust coiled in lazy spirals, carried by a dry wind that scraped against the skin. In the center stood a woman bound in chains, wrists raw from the iron. Evelyn Hart was her name, though no one here spoke it. They called her the Bride, as if she were a thing and not a soul, as if her life began and ended in this one cruel moment. The crowd had gathered for spectacle. They leaned on fence rails and horse posts, boots planted in the grit, hats tipped low against the sun. Laughter rose like cruel music, coarse and sharp against the silence Evelyn tried to keep. She stood straight, shoulders drawn back, though shame pressed like a weight against her chest. Every jeer, every mocking glance was a lash, but she let them strike without flinching. Pride was all that had not yet been stolen. Sheriff Amos Greeley, with his gray mustache and weary eyes, climbed onto the wagon box. His voice cracked across the square. "Now then, folks. A debt must be paid, and the law don't wait. We'll take her off the county's hands." The first laugh came from Tom Harker, a rancher with a gut full of whiskey and malice. He spat in the dust and called out, "She's worth less than the chain she's wearing." The crowd roared. Evelyn's throat tightened, but her face stayed still, carved like stone. Clara Finch, the seamstress, whispered loud enough for others to hear, "A woman like her won't keep. Mark my words, trouble wrapped in skirts." The whisper spread, quick as prairie fire, feeding on cruelty. Evelyn caught them all, every word a reminder that she was nothing more than gossip in their mouths. Sheriff Amos called out a bid, though his voice lacked conviction. The laughter drowned him. Men jostled one another, nudging shoulders, mocking the very idea of her being called bride. The heat pressed down harder, the air thick with shame, until even Evelyn's breath seemed heavy with dust. And then silence. From the edge of the square, where the crowd thinned, a figure stepped forward. Caleb Boone, tall, weather-burnished, the kind of man who wore quiet like a second skin. His boots cut steady into the earth, his hat shadowing eyes that missed nothing. He hadn't laughed, not once. His face bore no sneer, no hunger. He looked at Evelyn the way a man might look at a distant mountain, solid, unmoved by others' noise. He did not lift his hand and bid. He did not jangle coins. Instead, his voice carried, deep and measured, each word landing heavy. "My boy needs her." The square froze. For a moment, even the wind held its breath. The laughter died in throats, replaced by something harder to name. Caleb had not spoken as a man seeking a wife, nor as one eager for possession. His words were simple, stripped to the bone. Need, not want. His son, not himself. Evelyn's heart stuttered. She did not understand what he meant, but the sound of it, the calm certainty, broke something in the cruel theater of square. The sheriff, surprised, nodded quick, eager to be done. Then it settled. The chains fell from Evelyn's wrists with a harsh clatter, leaving raw skin behind. She rubbed them gently, the iron stink lingering. The crowd, still restless, whispered among themselves. Some muttered that Caleb Boone had lost his wits. Others smirked, already turning the story into a new vein of gossip. The widower who bought a bride for his boy. Caleb did not answer them. He walked past the crowd, toward the wagon, his stride steady. Evelyn followed, the weight of invisible chains still dragging behind her. No one touched her now, though every stare burned. The ride out of town was quiet. The wheels creaked, the mules snorted, the road stretched long beneath the sky. Evelyn sat stiff, clutching her hands together as if still bound. She did not look at Caleb, though she could feel the space between them, silent, heavy, but not cruel. He didn't speak, didn't press her with questions or claims. His silence was strange, almost protective, like shade in the blistering sun. When they reached the Boone Ranch, the sky was bleeding gold into evening. A boy stood at the gate, Samuel Boone, no more than 7. His hair tumbled into his eyes, his frame thin but wiry, the kind of boy who lived close to the land. He stared at Evelyn with wide, cautious eyes, clutching a stick in one hand as if it were a sword. Evelyn climbed down, her skirts brushing against the dust. She expected the boy to turn away, to run, to echo the scorn she'd endured all day. Instead, after a long pause, Samuel stepped forward. From behind his back, he produced a small, wilted wildflower, its stem bent, petals half gone. He thrust it into her hand, awkward, shy. Evelyn's throat closed. The flower was nothing, yet everything. More than coins, more than chains, it was an offering without mockery. She held it as though it might crumble, as though it were the first real thing she'd touched in years. Behind her, Caleb's gaze lingered, steady but unreadable. The sky deepened to violet as Evelyn crossed the threshold of a house not her own. The door creaked shut, and the weight of silence filled the space. The town's laughter still echoed in her memory, sharp and cruel, but here was only quiet, uncertain and vast. And somewhere within that silence, a seed of something unnamed stirred. The Boone Ranch woke each day with the hush of dawn, the land painted in silver before the sun spilled its warmth. Evelyn rose early, though sleep rarely stayed long. She moved about the house quietly, the boards creaking under her step, still carrying the heaviness of the chains that were gone, yet not forgotten. The first mornings felt like walking through a dream. Samuel studied her with wide eyes, watchful but curious. When she placed a plate of biscuits before him, he whispered a soft thank you, his voice shy as though words cost him dearly. Caleb, at the head of the table, ate in silence, his movements steady and measured. He did not command, did not assume. He simply was, and that steadiness unsettled Evelyn more than cruelty ever had. In town, whispers traveled faster than dust in the wind. Clara Finch leaned against her shop door, arms folded, mouth quick with judgment. Bought himself a bride, just like cattle. Men chuckled when Caleb's wagon rolled by with Evelyn seated beside him, her chin high though her heart trembled. Every trip to the mercantile was a trial, each stare a reminder that her dignity had been put on auction for all to see. But back on the ranch, something softer stirred. Samuel followed her as she worked, a small shadow with questions and restless energy. One afternoon, she caught him tugging at a sleeve torn clean through at the elbow. Without thinking, she threaded a needle and patched it, her fingers clumsy but determined. The boy's eyes lit with surprise, and when she handed it back, he smiled as though she had given him the world. At night, the wind howled through the cracks, rattling the shutters. Evelyn often sat by the small fire, her hands folded tight, tears pressing unbidden at the edges of her eyes. It was then Caleb would appear, wordless. Once, he draped a wool blanket over her shoulders and left without asking why she cried. The weight of that silent kindness cut deeper than any sharp word could have. She had known men who demanded, men who broke, but never one who simply stood beside pain without trying to own it. Days stretched into weeks, and still the gossip swelled. Tom Harker, leaning outside the saloon, made a show of calling out, "How's your bargain, Boone? She cook as good as she cost." The crowd erupted, but Caleb never turned his head. Instead, he carried on, walking beside Evelyn as though the jeers were no louder than the wind. She hated how those words burned her skin, but she also felt a flicker of something else, dignity, returned to her by a man who did not flinch at the world's scorn. Then came the night of the storm. The sky split wide, lightning clawing across the dark. Rain lashed against the windows, drumming wild against the earth. Samuel, restless with boyhood and fear, slipped from the house unnoticed, chasing after the cry of a calf lost in the thunder. When Evelyn realized, her heart lurched into her throat. She flung open the door, the wind near tearing it from its hinges, and ran into the blackness. Caleb was only a step behind. Their voices carried into the storm, calling the boy's name, swallowed by the roar of rain and river. Evelyn's skirts clung heavy to her legs, her hair plastered against her face, but she did not stop. Every step forward was a prayer, every breath a plea. She found him at the river's edge, mud sucking at his boots, the current clawing dangerously close. Samuel's eyes were wide with terror, his small body trembling. Without thought, Evelyn leapt, grasping him tight, pulling him to her chest. "I've got you," she whispered, fierce and breathless. "I won't let go." Caleb's lantern light cut through the dark as he reached them. His hand steadied her arm, guiding them both back from the rushing water. Together they stumbled through the storm, the boy clutched between them, until the house rose like a shadow through the sheets of rain. Inside, Samuel clung to Evelyn, burying his face against her shoulder. His voice, small and breaking, whispered the word that struck deep into her chest. "Mama." The room stilled. Caleb's eyes met hers across the flickering firelight, and in them was no claim, no demand. Only quiet gratitude, the kind that spoke of trust born in the fiercest trial. From that night, the gossip lost its edge. Whispers turned softer, shaded with respect. Folks spoke less of chains and auctions, more of a boy who smiled again, of a woman whose back no longer bent beneath shame. And when the days settled once more into their gentle rhythm, Evelyn would sometimes pause, her hands deep in wash water or flour, and glance toward the horizon. She had not chosen this life, not at first. It had been thrust upon her, cruel and merciless. Yet here, in the silence of a man's steady presence and the unguarded love of a child, she found what no auction block could strip away. The old soul's voice returns, soft and lingering. Dignity cannot be sold, nor bought with coins or chains. It waits, quiet, until someone sees beyond your shame and calls you needed. And sometimes, in the harshest corners of this world, love arrives not as thunder, but as a hand steadying yours in the storm.